Test, test. Test, test.
كيفكن؟ عم شفت لابتوبس كثير. بعتنا مسج امبارح انه جيبوا اللابتوبس لانه رح يكون مثل ورشة عمل اليوم اكثر من محاضرة. رح نبلش دكتور سارفان أوزونوغلو من Arctic University of Norway رح يشرح شوي، وبعدين اكثرية السيشن الثانية رح تكون ورشة عمل وتطبيق، بس يمكن جزء من المحاضرة الأولى كمان. فإذا حدا نسي ما يجيب اللابتوب بركي بالكافي بريك بتقدروا تجيبوه. اوكي؟ فبعد عنا يومين وهيك تقريبا خلصنا. بعرف انه في ناس اشتغلوا مؤخر امبارح اول امبارح وتعبانين، ناس بعضهم عم بيوصلوا وناس واصلين. يعطيكم العافية. يلا بعد 24 ساعة بنكون خالصين. طيب دكتور سارفان أوزونوغلو.
Hello. Today, as you know, we will have two sessions. We'll start with a conceptual introduction to cybersecurity, surveillance, and social networks. I think that this part is mostly going to be about why do you need cybersecurity tools. So in this first part, I don't think that you are going to need your laptops that much, but in the second part, you will need a lot, because we will make your old computers as secure as possible. So yeah, as possible, because there are some things that you can never avoid, and there are some physical interventions that you are supposed to make when it comes to cybersecurity. But I will start with a theoretical introduction. Let's start with the keywords that we use while we are talking about privacy, surveillance, and cybersecurity. Then what is privacy? Privacy is not a phenomenon specific to digital media like the internet. Modern thinking about privacy and surveillance has for a long time been bound up with the media. So most of the people think that when it is about privacy, it is about media, new media, internet, but it is not. From the activities of intelligence agencies to activities of telecommunication companies and all other things, these all have something to do with privacy. It has been defined as either the right to be left alone or as the right to determine for oneself which areas of life should be accessible to others, or it is also defined as combination of these two. So there is something over here. What is private? First of all, what is private for you? For me, what is private is the things that have nothing to do with each other people, the things that I don't want other people to know and I don't feel that other people should know. But the notions of privacy and cybersecurity are complicated in terms of the political understanding of privacy as well. So I will go with this question. I will start with questioning the liberal purpose of privacy. The major points of criticism of the modern privacy concept advanced by the Marxian analysis are that privacy is frequently fetishized in liberal thought, thereby takes on an ideological character and tries to mask negative consequences of capitalism. Wow, what does it mean? Yeah, it's a complicated sentence, but it definitely means something. It means that if you are Mark Zuckerberg, if you are, I don't know, Tim Cook, if you are founder of Google, if you are a banker in Beirut, if you are a business person in Istanbul, for everybody, your privacy is important. But when it comes to you, me, and these regular citizens, suddenly everybody starts not caring about our privacy. Everybody is like, okay, they're just citizens, let's track them. They're just citizens, let's track their internet behavior. They are just citizens, let's just look at what they are doing with their bank accounts, what they bought recently. And here's another thing. Have you ever come across an example while you are talking with your friends? For instance, a day ago, 2 days ago, we were with the lecturers here, and we were talking about an app called Slack. I think you all know Slack. It's a kind of working platform, digital working platform for people. And minutes afterwards, I saw an advertisement of Slack in my Facebook. So what does it mean? So there are many options. This is maybe because many people who are connected to this Wi-Fi system has downloaded Slack to their computers or systems. It's a possibility. Or, here comes the more scary one. Someone was listening. It's probable. It's probable since most of the applications that we use in our telephones, on our computers, they grant access to the microphones and cameras of our telephones and computers. So this liberal understanding of privacy mostly has nothing to do with that. It is more concerned about people who have bank accounts in Switzerland, who have bank or offshore accounts in Panama, who have some shady relationships with the governments. So this is why, while we are talking about privacy, we shouldn't be fighting for the liberal privacy, which mostly works for the good of capital owners. We should work for some counterforce. We shouldn't fetishize the notion of privacy. So here you see how Marx and Engels have advanced the 4 elements of the critique of liberal privacy concept. So also it was taken up by Arendt and Habermas. Privacy as atomism that advances, possessive individualism that harms the public good, legitimizes and reproduces the capitalist first-class structure, and capitalist patriarchy. So we need to be critical about privacy before starting this course, because the proper way of thinking about privacy starts with criticizing even the privacy itself. Yeah, we need privacy. We all need a privacy, but what kind of privacy? Privacy for whom? Why do we need anonymity? Why do you need anonymity in your life? Most of the people here come from some countries which might have difficulties in terms of the democracy, right? I'm coming from one of them. So we need anonymity, and we need full anonymity. I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain why social networks are evils, like Twitter, Facebook, etc., and how they work with governments. I'm going to explain why governments don't even need to work with these big companies, since we are leaving too many things for government to track us. The anonymity of wealth, high incomes, and profits make income and wealth gaps between the rich and the poor secrets, and thereby ideologically helps legitimizing and upholding these gaps. What does Christian Fuchs mean here? I think he basically means that, you know, what is the main understanding of Republicans in the US? They say that if they reduce the tax for the rich, life will be easier, right? It's classical Republican understanding of American politics. I think the privacy notion is just like that. They believe that if we don't track the rich people, yeah, they might do some shady business, but in the end, they will provide some employment, they will buy some luxury, etc., etc. So here comes the question, why? Why should we let them do their financial interactions without any control? Why should we let them use cash money in really interesting ways? Why should we let them to anonymize all their movements while none of our movements are anonymous? So let's come to digital privacy. Digital privacy is comparatively a new notion. So it refers to the protection of individuals' information that is used or created on a computer or personal device. And it is not dependent on being connected to the internet. It is not dependent from physical security and freedom as well. So if you are not in a physically secure environment, you are not digitally secure as well. Today we are going to do a lot of things with your computers. We are going to download things, we are going to add add-ons, we are going to see if they are secure or not. But here comes the most important thing. If you are caught by police as a journalist, all you have to be anxious about is he will have physical access to your computer. And you have to have a computer that is completely anonymized, completely encrypted. If you have enough knowledge about cybersecurity. But most of the time, journalists don't have such a time, don't have such an educational background, don't have these kind of cybersecurity things in their computers. What journalists have is a lot of information about their sources, a lot of information about the documents that they are working on, etc., etc. So let's keep on with what is surveillance. I know that this part is a little bit theoretical, but it is monitoring of the behavior, activities, or other changing information for the purpose of influencing, managing, directing, or protecting people. Yeah, survey me so you can protect me. Some scholars have defined surveillance as the systematic gathering and processing of personal data for the management of individuals or groups. Some other scholars state that surveillance tries to bring about or to prevent certain behaviors in groups or individuals by gathering, storing, processing, diffusing, assessing, and using data. So as everything is data, most of the things are surveyable. Let's go for the search for this new term, digital surveillance. How did it emerge? There has been many attempts to define these new forms of surveillance. Here are some of the names proposed: new surveillance, dataveillance, electronic super panopticon, which comes from Foucault's conception and Bentham's conception, electronic surveillance, digital surveillance, worldwide web of surveillance, which is kind of outdated now, and digital enclosure. I really don't care about the name. I care about what it does to you. So what is it? Scholars in surveillance studies and information society studies have stressed the importance of the competing for conducting surveillance for more than 20 years. So Gary T. Marks defines the new surveillance, the concept that we mostly use, as the use of technical means to extract or create personal data. Wow. Extracting personal data. Whose personal data? And who uses these extraction techniques? And then the new surveillance is not on the scene, but it is remote, which means that, think about yourself in 1920s. You were a journalist. Probably your communication can only be tracked through maybe some telephone calls if you are in a lucky part of the world, mails that you send, or the people that you meet with, person to person. So the intelligence agencies of the time, law enforcement agencies of the time, were following or tracking journalists or this kind of people physically. But now it is remote. They don't have to be here to watch you. I think you all have watched some interesting movie about intelligence agencies and their activities. How many of you have watched this? Homeland, completely pro-American understanding of the politics, international affairs. I think you all know about drones, right? How they are surveying the places and how they are bombing the places. So now they don't need that. If they need physical surveillance, they don't need two men or women, doesn't matter, watching you or tracking you in the streets of your country. Of course, they still do these techniques because I hope that they are not able to see all the layers of the buildings yet. But in the end, yeah, there are remote techniques of surveillance as well. So today, this new surveillance is less coercive and more democratized. Come on, what is democratized surveillance? It means that we can counter-survey people as well. We can survey them as well. I can even survey, and I will probably, all of you in this room. So the computerized surveillance is the new, most important form of new surveillance because we all have computers. Your smartphone is a computer. In the end, everything is computer, so everything is trackable, everything is surveyable. So here is a slide about Panopticon. The concept was conceived by Jeremy Bentham as prison architecture in the 19th century. Yeah, it is depressive. Prison architecture and the architecture of modern society, modern communication, modern telecommunication techniques. So later it was connected to academic discussions about the notions of surveillance and disciplinary power by Michel Foucault. And Mark Poster in 1990 has coined the notion of this electronic super panopticon. So what is electronic super panopticon? How can we think of this electronic super panopticon? Electronic super panopticon is the internet service provider and their agreements with the governments. Most of the time it is United States of America. You know, they have too many connections all around the world. And also United Kingdom has a good, has a big hegemony over the international network. So these super panopticon, yeah, it was mentioned in 1990s, 1970s, etc., etc. But now we are in 2010s. So there is a more intense, more powerful panopticon that we are talking about. Today's circuits of communication and databases, they generate constitute a super panopticon, a system of surveillance without walls, windows, and towers or guards. So the thing about Panopticon is you feel surveyed, even when you are not surveyed. I go to the coffee house in Turkey. I see some people who are in their 40s and 50s. They have nothing to do with politics. They have no big information that is relevant for political actors. But they all close their telephones. They all get into flight mode when they start talking about politics sometimes. They think that the government is watching. And be sure that the government is watching. It doesn't matter how detailed it is. It doesn't matter how intense they are watching you, because everybody has kind of priority in government's lists. But what matters here is, even if they are not watching you, you feel like you are surveyed. And it is the worst part of surveillance technologies of today. So Costas considers internet surveillance as technology of control. And here I add another thing. Today all the internet economy is based on surveillance. You know Google Ads. How many of you benefit from Google Ads in their digital internet projects? I think most of you. Or this kind of digital advertising program like that. Google AdSense. for instance. It is completely based on the surveillance and many other advertising networks. So let's pass this one. So we don't waste time. Surveillance of personal data captured from the internet use is the core of the surveillance. But you don't need to use the internet. You are not, it doesn't have to be like you have to be connected to the internet to be surveyed. Your offline behavior is also tracked. How? Because your computer is like a diary, and it's always collecting information about your personal activities and all the things that you do. So the telecommunication signals, the stations that surround us, these all gather information. For instance, in Turkey, one of the people who are one of the leaders of human rights struggle in Turkey is now imprisoned just because he has been in the same place with the US diplomats at the same time, because their telephones gave signal from the same places. Actually, I don't know if you have been to Istanbul, but it looks definitely like Beirut. Most of the time, you go to the same places with the people that you share your community with. So elites go to souk, I guess, and some intellectuals have their own places, hipsters go to their places, and activists and politicians go to the same place most of the time. And it was a crime in Turkey. It's a crime in Turkey. He wasn't connected to the internet. He was just using his phone in a regular way, and the bus station nearby has just detected that he was there while there was another person from some government or something like that. So governments can easily use conspiracies or conspiracy theories against you in the age of surveillance, and all the data that they tracked about you can be used in that way. So specialized internet services and internet service providers especially, they are the main actors of surveillance. And today, there are too many technologies and practices designed to access data from the internet users. So, what about Web 2? Web 2 is kind of an old thing right now, but rise in the amount of user-generated content resulted in more content to be analyzed for private companies, governments, and non-governmental actors. Now, NGOs are watching you because you leave many things behind. Government is watching you. Companies are watching you. Other governments are watching you. So, why and how? First of all this data economy, all this surveillance economy is about people and how they behave. Hundreds of years ago, maybe psychology or sociology was used to understand how people might behave, what they are going to do the next, what will be their reactions to some certain things. Today, we are all like members of a focus group for brands all the time. So it was in the presentation about beauty, I guess, we were talking about numbers of advertisements that are surrounding us. I think that we should be concerned about numbers of consumers around us. We have been transformed into consumers. We are not citizens anymore, that's for sure. And we are not political as much as we used to be. We are economic units of the society. So which means that this Web 2, Facebook, Twitter, Google Buzz, now it is Google Plus, they all have the same notion, same understanding of us. So highly personalized data. I don't know if you have ever come across somebody else's computer and use it. Probably, if he or she is another character different than you, you are going to see many different ads that you have never seen before. in the same websites that you visit. Because they are using Google AdSense or this kind of advertising platforms, and they target the specific person that you use the computer of. For instance, if I use my wife's computer, I will be seeing completely different ads. And here is another thing, IP-based. It used to be IP-based. For instance, maybe 5 years ago, it was more like if you are connecting from the same house, it was very possible that you all see the same kind of ads. But it is completely based on MAC IDs today. So if I had a kid, he would have seen or she would have seen different kinds of ads. My wife, something other, and me, something other. So it is specified. It is even so specified that Google or Facebook or these kind of companies don't want to lose their tracks. How many of you use Google Chrome? So you all have to log into it through your Google accounts, right? If you would like to use it in proper way. So it means that if you are using it here too, in your mobile phones, it means that yeah, you are tracked in your computer, you are tracked here. So this data about you is synchronized, and it becomes an economic data that can be used by advertising companies, and you create them more and more and more data. So private corporations have been involved in data more than ever right now because they know. And here is a crisis. Here comes the crisis of journalism industry. I don't know how many of you are working for printed journals, printed newspapers, but most of the scholars or studies release that or show that amount of money gained through print ads is in decrease all around the world. But digital ads, yeah, it's increasing. Of course, there are some waves. Something is in its peak, sometimes it's going worse. But it changes from country to country. Of course, elections are important issues that increase the amount paid on printed ads, etc. But in the end, digital revenues, digital ad revenues is in increase. Why? To be honest, if I were targeting AB populations, which is like middle class, upper middle class, or the elites of the society, I would definitely never advertise on printed media. Maybe only for prestige on some certain times, but I would never try it because I have data about each of them. If he or she has a yacht, if he or she has gone to Louis Vuitton at the weekends, if he or she has bought, for instance, I don't know, maybe new shoes for his or her summer holiday, or he or she has bought a bikini for her weekend holiday. So if she has bought a bikini, I should show her a kind of sunbathing cream, for instance. Why? Why not? That's how this surveillance and target advertising industry works. So it has been a milestone in the advertising market, and here comes another term. I use it a lot: hyper-personalization of data. The thing is, in elections, the governments cannot get certain data about who is voting for whom in the households, right? You know, most of the places around the world. They know some of the neighborhoods or some of the streets are voting mostly for that party or this party. But they don't need such an information. So the surveillance techniques today is so great and so public that how many of you voted in last elections in your countries and wrote whom or which party you voted for on Facebook? Can I understand which party that you are voting for if I go to your Facebook feed? Probably I can. And Facebook does as well through their wonderful robots. Or Google does it. So which means that this hyper-personalization is not about you. It's about the profit of the companies, profit of the political parties. So it is completely a thing that should be scary. So These new platforms, Web2 platforms, are dependent on massive provision and storage of personal data that are systematically evaluated, marketed, and used for targeting users with advertising. Actually, we are just demonizing Facebook, Google, etc., but most of the companies around the world benefit from their services. We, as the journalists or academics, we also benefit from their services. I'm sure that most of the universities around the world benefit from Google services, Google AdWords, etc., in order to advertise their services and gain new students. So, however, the implications of new surveillance model is not limited to ones that I listed above, before. So, there are two different types of surveillance that we are exposed to in daily life: workplace surveillance and consumer surveillance. Workplace surveillance is for sure about how many times have you opened your email account per day, how many of you use Blackboard in their university life or something like that. It's completely based on surveillance of academics and students. I know which time my students had access to the Blackboard for the last time. For instance, if it was 12 weeks ago, and if it is the grading period of the year, and if the students come to me and says that, I was really active, I read all the things, etc., etc., I will be like, okay, let's see your Blackboard profile. So, the workplace surveillance is also for me, not about me and my students. My supervisor can easily track most of my behaviors. So it doesn't need to be a kind of shady thing, or he or she doesn't need to sneak around it. He or she can just look at my Foursquare account, which doesn't exist. So for most people, we like saying where we are. We like saying what we are doing. I was in Paul yesterday, and I saw a woman. She firstly checked in Foursquare, or this new name of it. Then she posted to Snapchat with geotag, then to Instagram with another geotag, then to Facebook. I just watched her and I said, why? Why do we need to geotag ourselves that much? Does she want someone to know it? But do we want too many professional colleagues or people that we know from professional life to know where we are right now? If you would like to know, do it in LinkedIn. I don't know, but it is really interesting. I mentioned consumer surveillance a lot, but here are some quotes about workplace surveillance. If you're a parent and you have a teenager son or daughter coming home late and not doing their homework, you might wonder what they are doing. It is the same as employees. Okay, employees as kids. The second one, the work of directing, superintending, and adjusting becomes one of the functions of the capital from the moment that labor under capital's control becomes cooperative. As a specific function of the capital, the directing function acquires its own specific characteristics. Okay, how many of you are on Slack? How many of you are on a WhatsApp group? So it means that you are under the supervision and surveillance of your employer most of the time. John Bellem Foster wrote a book called 724 Capitalism, as far as I remember. It was a wonderful book. It was telling us that what kind of society that we are living in. Our bosses can send us SMS like 10 o'clock in the evening. They can send us email in the afternoon, in the weekends, etc., etc. So here comes the problem. In most of the countries which have better economies, better union rights, etc., you can be paid for even an email that you responded in the time out of your work hours. But it is not like that in the United States of America, in most of the countries around the world, which are pretty neoliberalized. So, workplace surveillance has always been there. There were people just watching if people are working or not. But today it is not only about that. It is also about something that we are not that much concerned with. How many hours of your work time that you're actually working? Yeah, I know that most of the people are always on their computers in their offices. But be honest, are you playing free cell? Are you checking your Facebook account? Actually, if I were you, I wouldn't. If your bosses are smart people, they would be tracking all of your activities. So if I didn't have some technical problems, I would be tracking all your activities right now in this salon while you are watching me. Because we are all connected to the same Wi-Fi network with the exact same password, right? This guest. So it means that, for instance, if she is using Snapchat right now, I can even see the Snapchat filter that she is using. Today we are going to talk about how we can avoid this kind of surveillance. We are not going to only talk about this surveillance. Companies are collecting various types of data about you. I think that we have talked a lot about this enough. And here, how do brands survey you? What are the methods of consumer surveillance? Let's start with location tracking. How many of you left your Wi-Fi open while going around souk or somewhere like that, or in a shopping mall? Our smartphones are randomly, they're authorized to try to connect to the public Wi-Fi accounts that they see. For instance, here it is free Wi-Fi, here it is blah blah. If it is not encrypted, if it doesn't have a password, it seems like a user-friendly thing. But think about us. Let's assume that we all went to souk, and we all went through all these fancy brands. And on the right, there is one brand, and it has free Wi-Fi, and it just takes the message that my phone is there, so I am there. Because I am the person who has this specific MAC ID for his telephone. So, even while you are walking across the street, if your Wi-Fi is looking for a host that it can connect easily, it means that it receives messages and it sends messages to some brands. And how do they use it? Have you ever got a message when you walked into a brand's showroom? It is really common in Turkey, especially these days. When you go into, for instance, SC Waikiki or this kind of brands, you rapidly get a message saying that we have a discount in this kind of products. Okay, I just walked into the room. How could you detect that? They can, because our internet service providers and telecommunication companies mostly belong to the same exact firm. Here comes another problem: monopolization or oligopolization of communication technologies. Most of the time, liberals complain that Russia is under the control of a great oligopoly, right? Everybody is complaining about that. Yeah. But we are living under a kind of tyranny of some oligopoles all around the world. It can be either Google, it can be Facebook, it can be any internet service providers, Verizon, or I don't know, what is the one here? It's Touch, I guess. So these all firms can create problems for us because they are sharing all kind of delicate information about us because they have some mutual agreements between each other. So retail establishments can use your phone's Wi-Fi signals to find out when you go into a store or when you pass by them. Within the store, they can figure out what displays that you stop in front of or what aisles you linger in. Wow. You are into a store. Assume that you are in a MacBook store and you go to the place where I don't know, iWatches are, Apple Watches are. So they know that you are looking for them. I know that it doesn't seem realistic in some aspects because sometimes in some parts of the world, these mapping or geotagging technologies don't work very well. But now I'm living in Norway. I'm coming from Norway, and most of the surveillance technologies are working really well there, just like in Germany. So it is completely serving your all activities, even in the smallest places that you can imagine. So it is like an outcome of the success of the military-industrial complex around the world. If I was a soldier, all I would want would be knowing where my enemy is. So it's a war. It's a war against the humanity. So there are some other methods, of course. The widespread use of surveillance cameras, shopping centers, office buildings, and all other public areas. For instance, bus system is surveyed by video cameras all the time. And they say that they don't work probably, but I don't know. Ethically and legally in some countries, you need to be informed about who is operating the camera, who you can contact about questions, and the purpose of the surveillance. And in the Middle East, it is mostly not like that. I know that from my country. So video surveillance is especially concerning because facial recognition software is becoming more and more sophisticated. So if you have these last versions of iPhone or Samsung or this kind of technologies, probably your phone has this biometric understanding of your body, which means that if your telephone knows your facial expressions, the way that you look, yeah, they already knew. We all have Facebook, right? It is randomly tagging you in some other friend's picture. Says that, is it you, Sarphan? So it is like that. But it is not only Facebook now. It is the government. It is the companies. It is everyone. So assume that you are the boss of a big company who has a store in the city center, and you have the capability of knowing the identity of every single person that comes to your shop. It's a big chance if you are a retailer. For instance, if you're working in this LC Waikiki in Samra Street, and if you had a good marketing policy, you would have a really great chance of targeted advertising, targeted marketing, because your algorithms can track these people's previous photos and try to understand their understanding of fashion, and they can recommend this person where to go. In terms of this marketing perspective, actually my undergraduate degree is on public relations and advertising, so it is really interesting for me. If I had this kind of technologies, I would use them, and they are using them. They will be using much more. If the Google Glass or this kind of technologies become more widespread, if these wearable technologies become more widespread, we are going to see the times where there will be no salespeople in most of the shops, because our own understanding of fashion is going to be understood by algorithms, and they are going to redirect us to the exact places that we should go. So, retailers also track you using loyalty cards and loyalty programs. Consumers sign up for the program, typically providing their name, age, gender, address, and email address, and collect points by sweeping or scanning the card or app each time they make an in-store purchase. I don't have to give away this kind of information if I am not flying internationally, in my opinion. Yeah, and it is mostly about terrorism and all other stuff when it's flying. But do you know, I don't know what's the situation here. For instance, our government in Turkey has just started collecting this local transportation information about each person. For instance, if you're going from Istanbul to another city in Turkey, the bus company has to have all this information about you. So you need to fill a form to get into a bus. And it doesn't matter if it is a bus or it is Hugo Boss, because it does exactly the same thing through their loyalty programs. Often businesses don't tell you that the objective of these programs is not to give you rewards, but rather to collect detailed information about you. I think that it was last month, I downloaded H&M's app on my computer, on my telephone, because I needed to benefit from some kind of sale. So I became part of a big loyalty program. You are not loyal because you always go to this place. I think you are loyal, and I am a little bit fool because I gave away lots of information to H&M about, because this app collects more information than it needs. Most of the apps collects more information than it needs. For instance, most of the conservative people, Muslims, have these worship hours 5 times a day, right? And we have some applications for this. Some Azan applications, etc., and they warn you when the time of worshiping comes. So it is effective, it is good, but do you know that even these applications want access to your microphones? Is it reasonable, is it sensible, or is it scary? So they can get information about if you are coming down with a cold, your personal hygiene habits based on your purchases. Here's another thing. Assume that your future employer has all the records regarding the shoppings that you have made, the purchases that you have made in last 1 year. For instance, if I had bought ibuprofen including medicine too regularly, they would probably think that this person is getting sick a lot, so we shouldn't employ him or her. Okay, so here comes the question, how we can avoid it? I don't know. So here's another thing, online shopping and consent. I think most of us are doing online shopping. For instance, Amazon is coming to more and more countries every day. We all have Amazon alternatives. And tracking cookies are one of the most common ways that online stores track your behavior. The cookie identifies you to websites when you go back to them more than once, and keeping track of your preferences like your password and username. They record things like websites you visit, where you are in the world, and what you click on while surfing the web. So there are some key phases and actors in consumer surveillance, which are data aggregation, de-identification, and predictive analytics. These are the methods that they use. Then, what are the political implications of this new surveillance regime? Let's start with digital intelligence. Let's go to 9/11 and the shock doctrine on new media landscape and counter-surveillance power of new media. So let's start with digital open source surveillance. What does it mean? Digital open source surveillance, which means that the sources that we create by ourselves through our user-generated content, our main daily activities, etc., are tracked by the governments and intelligence agencies. It can be achieved without any violations of law in most cases all around the world. Almost 90% of the total intelligence activities for agencies of United Kingdom, Sweden, Netherlands, and Europol are done this way. Really legitimately. They just get all the data and they direct you. Big data explosion is totally relevant regarding increasing interest towards this digital open source intelligence. And private citizens or academic organizations are more advantageous since they don't need permission most of the time to store and keep your data. Oh, here comes the Cambridge Analytica scandal that we have just experienced. So this data is used for tracking and profiling terrorism suspects, they say, following massive protests, and weapons of mass destruction. Okay. But it tracks me. So I have never held a gun all out my life. I'm completely against violence, but you know, I can be a terrorist, right? So, new surveillance and intelligence agencies. What enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike, conquer, and achieve things beyond the reach of the ordinary man is foreknowledge. What is foreknowledge? It's the thing that you need if you are in war with some kind of organization. So it's by Sun Tzu, it's from The Art of War, his book. So, of course, he was not aware of real-time data gathering methods. He was not aware of the power of Google Analytics. Where is the cursor in the web page that you own? You know it. How many words of the article people read? They know it. So this kind of tracking says a lot about your consumers. So do your enemies. So the intelligence now is not limited to, of course, security issues or military issues. It's also about trade, finance, culture, education. And there are some intelligence categories that are gathered through these surveillance methods, which are geospatial intelligence, financial intelligence, technical intelligence, cyber intelligence, and open source intelligence. So which means there is an intelligence for everyone. You just have to pick it. So which type of digital open source data are processed by intelligence agencies? Friend networks. You have 20 common friends with this person, 80 common friends with this person, right? It's how Facebook works. And it is how Twitter recommends you to follow someone. And of course, intelligence agencies use that. Interaction networks, use of hashtags, contextual analysis of messages, geotext, hardware is used to access social networks, software is used to access them, filters that you use on Instagram, and search terms that you frequently used are used in order to position you as a part of a specific community. So let's go with some case studies about the use of digital surveillance technologies in order to use it for political purposes. How Boston police used Twitter and Facebook to surveil protesters. So in this example, a keyword search relating to marijuana was applied. So the authorities of Boston police, of course, worked with Geophidia. It was an active service of the time, a social media monitoring startup that both Facebook and Twitter banned from using their data in December 2016, prompting a CLU's original recourse request. Using Geophidia, police were able to filter social media posts based on images, keywords, hashtags, and crucially location data, all in real time. Boston authorities tracked people tweeting Muslim Lives Matter online. This surveillance dragnet caught up everyone using the targeted tags, including emoji in the area, even if they opted not to disclose their location to Twitter itself. The Boston Regional Intelligence Center created an alert called Islamist Extremist Terminology and set up alerts around terrorism-related keywords like ISIS and Islamic State and words that may be connected to an attack, including smoke, boom, and backpack. It was later found out that the target tracker BRIC benefit from is capable of a link analysis to show who target is affiliated with on all social media. This refers to the associational data, which means that you're associated to some group, you're part of some group, or you're part of some movement. This triggered a debate about targeting people for surveillance because of who they're friends with. However, it is a typical use of social network analysis, and it is part of legal enforcement activities for decades all around the world. Let's go to the second one about this social network analysis-based surveillance. Early in 2000, the CIA was informed of two terrorist suspects linked to Al-Qaeda. Nazaf al-Azmi and Khalid al-Mihdar were photographed attending a meeting of known terrorists in Malaysia. After meeting, they returned to Los Angeles. They had already set up residence in late 1999. CIA started tracking their activities to discover their network. They looked at who they call or email, who visits them locally and or in other cities, where their money comes from. So they track basically everything. A suspect being monitored may have many contacts. They can be either accidental or intentional. So that's one of the crucial parts of social networking analyzing. Accidental contacts, like the mail delivery person, the grocery store clerk, a neighbor, may not be viewed with investigative interest, but most of the time they are. And intentional contacts, on the other hand, have been tracked. One of them was an afternoon visitor who had later went to Canada. These intentional contacts added to their map, and they started tracking his interactions. Where do they lead? As data comes in, a picture of the organization slowly comes into focus. And here is the framework, or is the network that they created about this organization. So it is not guaranteed that you will reach a result in the end with this kind of social network analysis, and contextual clues matter the most. And for this case, the attendance of one of the chief suspects of coal bombing was the triggering factor. So, as you see, all 19 hijackers were within 2 steps of the 2 original suspects uncovered in 2000. Social network metrics revealed that Mohammed Atta was emerging as the local leader of the organization that they are following. It's not guaranteed that you will reach result. Sorry, I just went back. So, I have some objections about this. Of course, I don't approve all these things, but I know that many intelligence agencies use these technologies in order to track our activities and our own life. But in Turkey, for instance, I like giving examples from my country because it's a big surveillance regime. One of the journalists who was working for the newspaper Cumhuriyet served in prison for almost a year just because he was called by a person who was working in a kebab shop and who was delivering them kebab, was affiliated to a kind of religious movement that's terrorized in Turkey. But this person served in prison saying that he bought pide from this person. And this person that he bought pide from had a certain application that this religious organization was using for their internal communication activities. Come on. Here comes the understanding of surveillance, and here comes the accidental and intentional contacts. If the governments have decided to imprison someone, this kind of surveillance data can be easily used with a really manipulative way. So, let's come to counter-surveillance. Here is a work one of my good friends, Efe Kerem Sözer, has done. Sometimes you can use counter-surveillance methods to map pro-government astroturfers. And this case is about mapping the pro-government astroturfers. You can call it, it's called trolls by many journalists, but I think it's completely wrong. In Turkey via social network analysis. At the Gezi Park protests of 2013, young people in Turkey gathered in mass, aiming to reclaim not only their lost green space from turning into a mall, but also their voice in country's politics. Twitter played a key role in organization and communication of the protests. And Turkey's ruling party, AKP, responded to this challenge by creating a 6,000-member social media team and astroturfers who were charged with promoting the party perspective and monitor online discussions. They are still active, by the way. The initial plan was similar to Vladimir Putin's astroturfers in Russia, posing as ordinary people and using them to promote a positive image of the government on comment section of the news articles. Here is the map Efe Kerem Sözer created based on the people who were part of this communicational network who are trying to manipulate the discussion in social media. They were using similar hashtags, they were interacting within each other, they were always there. And I will show you something. This person, he was supposed to be, or he was known as the head of the trolls. And this person, he is now Industry Minister of Turkey. So this is a columnist. There are some, of course, state news organization, but there are too many other actors which are not real people, which are semi-anonymized accounts, which are believed to be funded by state agencies. So, he started his study with Esat Reis, who was a well-known astroturfer of the government. And starting from his activities or his mentions, interactions, etc., he created this map. Today, we are going to learn how to create a map like that. So, some of the users who are represented by bigger nodes later became ministers in the cabinet or gained some important roles within the government. These included one of the president's advisors and minister of this time. So case 4, there are too many cases. How media center located South Africans even they didn't allow geotags. To find you, intelligence services needn't hack your social media account or get a court order to force a social media company to release your private data. What they need are your public Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook posts and the right social media surveillance software. Social media companies sell your data to surveillance software companies, who then sell it to the government intelligence and law enforcement agencies. Media Sonar monitors social media activity within a specific geographic area. It's so important, though. There was really detailed information there. Company marketing materials uploaded to the United States National Security Internet Archive in February 2016 assert that Media Sonar can monitor Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Picasa. Do you know Picasa? It's online Photoshop kind thing. It's not popular now. YouTube, Flickr, Foursquare, and Vine. They were everywhere. So they were the big brother, actually. The software aims to identify security threats. But threats can be whatever governments decide them to be. So in South Africa, they also include protesters, non-profits, and media agencies that speak out against the ANC. So they started with selecting a geographical area of interest. And once the software is programmed to monitor posts like Twitter or Instagram within a specific area, it can also be programmed to gather posts occurring within a specific time frame. There is no limit to amount of data that they can gather, and it can be stored indefinitely. Of course, after European law, and this company was closed, by the way, these things changed, but who knows? An example of Media Sonar dashboard. So it looks like TweetDeck, as you can see if you have ever used it, or this kind of applications. But they see everything from a single area. Assume that most of us are using hashtags, so it is easy to cover this. But imagine that none of us used hashtags, but we were still tweeting. These kind of organizations would know what the people who are now in the LAU campus are tweeting about, and for a long term. It can be scary. Governments use it in order to profile. Governments use in order to understand which, for instance, a local government can know who is voting for them and who is not. They can bring electricity and water to some apartments, but not to some others. These kind of things happen. So, in the example below, a keyword search relating to marijuana was applied. So, you see. And scholars found and somehow they found where these kind of things are coming. Of course, they are not looking only for the specific word, marijuana. There are too many slang words that they use, that these people use in order to substitute this term. So here's another case, I think last case, I hope. Scholars found a significant positive relationship between sexual risk-related tweets and cases of primary and secondary and early latent syphilis, independent of the number of syphilis cases the prior year. Tweets were classified as syphilis risk-related if they contained one or more words or colloquial terms related to sexual intercourse. They created an algorithm that searched the collected data to identify tweets with at least one keyword. The text of each tweet was processed to maximize sensitivity and specificity of the content identification. Their dataset included 8,538 geolocated tweets from the United States that we identified as being related to sexual risk behaviors in 2012. In 2013, there was at least one case of this reported in 1,594 of 3,142 countries and country equivalents. Example, independent cities that do not belong to a county. So they found that counties with higher number of syphilis cases in the previous year, 2012, were associated with 0.6% increase in 2013, and PS syphilis incidence and 0.4% increase in early latent syphilis. So results suggested a relationship between syphilis and risk related to it. So what do you get from it? So let's get back to the political sense. If you always complain about, assume that I am the leader of the political opposition in some country, or I'm just going to run for local elections as mayor. So the first thing I would do would be searching for keywords. And if I see that there are some certain compliments about rubbish, for instance in Beirut, in some certain neighborhoods, I would focus on them and I would try to focus my campaign on them. So you can use social media to predict everything through surveillance technologies. And what about the role of social networks in surveillance? Social media platforms bridge the gap between identity and personal information typically generated the anonymous characteristics of internet-based communication. Their economy is boosted with surveillance, therefore, algorithms rely on mechanisms of surveillance. The potential recordability of social network data is an ideal asset for those who want to survey. High social influence and high level of interactivity also matter there. The social networks provide real-time data about citizens and users. They do not produce content. They provide data of the people who generated content. And it's possible to talk about 5 key features of social media or surveillance through social media. Collaborative identity construction. With the help of the image tagging and wall comments or posts, users contribute to identify the construction of others. We construct others. Yeah, they also construct themselves. They write something to their about section in their Facebook, but we also identify, construct the identity of other people. Social media surveillance make use of social ties that are visible, measurable, and searchable. It's not only about your father, mother, cousin. It's also about your ex-girlfriend, the person who is kind of surveying you, and all other people. Social media has access to all this information because of the data and algorithms that they create. Social media surveillance is confronted with continuously changing interfaces and contents. Of course, Facebook changes its algorithms all the time. Twitter does also. Google also changes their algorithms all the time. So which means that there is a continuous change. Yeah, let's pass it. So with social network analysis, we mentioned, and through their cooperation with popular social media platforms, governments actively and legally profile and label citizens. I think you all have heard about the citizen scoring system of Chinese Republic, right? Yeah, it's going to be everywhere. And I think that it is actively being used by governments. Most of the companies would like to know your social network profiles while you are applying for a job, right? It's the case in most of the world. So, and also you can end up in prison if you are not fully anonymous while using social networks in countries like Turkey, because these social networks have kind of sneaky relationship with governments. No matter how supportive social media platforms are in terms of freedom of speech, in the end they are all profit-oriented companies. Most of the private companies also do background check to your accounts, as I said, and most of the people don't even consider reading users' agreements. We never read. We don't have time for 2-page text before going to a website, right? Financial models driven by surveillance make people think that they are using free services while they are the products. So here is the computer of Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, you see, his camera is covered, his microphone is covered. It's more than, yeah, it's covered. So why? Yeah, of course, he's Mark Zuckerberg. He has a lot to hide. But probably he's on Facebook, right? He's everywhere. So Let's start with Facebook. So 2.23 billion monthly active users by first quarter of 2018. They own the most popular messaging apps worldwide, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. They are not just an app. They even work on an internet satellite to provide internet for the parts of the world that don't have proper internet connection. Even Cambridge Analytica scandal or accusations regarding fake news couldn't weaken their position in markets. They are competing with Google to become the ultimate evil corp of the globe. Do you know Evil Corp? Have you watched Mr. Robot? Probably. So Facebook tracks what you do on the internet, websites you have visited, the length of time you spent on a website, and in what sequence pages were accessed. They use this information for strategies such as their targeted advertising service called Facebook Audience Network to promote ads targeted to users' browsing tastes. Facebook also tracks users' location, meaning where they are and what they have been using Facebook and Instagram with. Facebook tracks the records of users' telephone calls and SMS, contact names, telephone numbers, call lengths, and text messages. It's like a kind of obsessive girlfriend or boyfriend, right? So, the amount of access that Facebook enjoys on your device almost equals the amount of access that you have as you use a calendar, camera, contacts, locations, microphone, SMS, storage, and other. So which means that this commodity, this telephone, belongs to Facebook more than it belongs to me. So, what kind of details that Facebook knows about you? For instance, it's for me. I am away from my hometown, yes. Yeah, I have an anniversary within 31 days or 60 days. Away from my family, I have birthday in March, etc., etc. But Facebook knows all this information about me. Isn't it scary? You just have to go to your Facebook settings and look at your ad preferences from your profile to see what Facebook knows about you. So it's almost impossible for brands to live there, since it is a big advertising platform. And you cannot leave Facebook, especially if you're a journalist or brand. Like in the debate of fake news, most of the allegations against Facebook are based on contemporary political debates. Structural criticism of Facebook is too academic for millions of people using it, of course. Imagine, you are even bored, so imagine thousands or millions of people who are watching this. So it is such a brilliant tool for political actors that they probably prefer to keep it around. So, yeah, we can discuss it later. I'm just going to skip it because I need to use my time more properly. So, at first blush, the Twitter information doesn't seem useful. At best, a jumble from the internet musings. However, data there contains powerful insights about brand perception, political leanings, and even market movements. Twitter data is public, but there is a ton of it, and the company limits how much someone can access at once. Companies pay for full or partial access to the firehouse, the source data available instantly, to offer intelligence to their own customers. Some companies bought data from Twitter to use them to monitor dissidents in countries such as Turkey or Saudi Arabia. Their software blends information from several social media platforms to unearth insights that platform alone could not provide. What about Snapchat? Use of geotags in Snapchat enables you to be discovered in services such as map.snapchat.com. Snap Maps makes it beneficial feature to keep a track on events, activities of a user, and verify social media photos. According to research from Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, these apps are particularly useful in verification. If this person is really there, if this person really took place, if this photo was really taken in exact time. For instance, assume that you are in a police investigation and you show a photograph saying that I was there on that day you mentioned. Police can fact check it. They can look at Google Maps. They can look if the building behind you was under construction at that time or not. This surveillance regime, which works over Snapchat, is really scary, or other platforms. So, to conclude, I have created 6 different questions for myself before you ask them. First of all, is digital privacy possible in the age of mass surveillance? Interestingly, it is possible, as we are going to see in the workshop. You have to reconsider your socialization practices. You need to accept that providing digital privacy is a difficult task. Existing alternatives are not user-friendly enough, and you have to get rid of most of the habits that you have. Second question, is it wise to leave Facebook and its partners to ensure our privacy? Facebook is just one, it is not just one social network. There are too many services that they provide, too many apps and newspapers or all other digital products that we consume benefit from their services. They own Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, as I said before. Only 3 million people left Facebook after Cambridge Analytica scandal, and still one of the most effective traffic sources for news outlets and brands. So I'm an academic. I work for some journalistic agencies as well, and I don't want to leave Facebook. It brings good traffic, it's for sure. It provides some visibility, but I just limit my use of Facebook with the tools that I'm going to show you in the second part. So, should we avoid using Google services? Have you ever used Google Analytics or Google Trends? Actually, you should avoid Google, and you can avoid Google. Google is not alternativeless. For Facebook, Facebook is also not alternativeless. So, which means that you can avoid both Facebook and Google at the exact same time and say that there is another word possible. I can search with DuckDuckGo. I can have social network through diaspora. But this kind of hacker world has its own disadvantages. You can be isolated from your community. For instance, imagine as a journalist leaving Twitter in crisis times. It's impossible in many countries because you have to have an access to public data. It's the dilemma of cybersecurity all around the world. And then comes Internet of Things, our wearables, Apple's products, Google Home, etc. So they are everywhere. They can nudge, manipulate, and mold our behavior, habits, and preferences. They limit our autonomy and bring quantification, segregation, and discrimination to what is currently a political economy held together by social fuzziness. Probably you know the case. Amazon's home device was used to resolve a suicide case by the police. So which means that these Internet of Things are also tools of surveillance. So, is it wise to be totally against mass surveillance? You can do targeted advertising. You can track through drones. You can still follow people physically. You have control points everywhere. Do you need mass surveillance? We need to ask this question to the state. It's not me or it's not you who should answer this question. And they will probably say that, yeah, mass surveillance is easier. It is easy to find the people who are being radicalized. But as I told, there is open source data available to companies and to people. Governments should that. They shouldn't use sneaky methods. But there is a part that we should be concerned about. We need to be careful about our use of these devices. So, does social network surveillance really work for the sake of national security? Here's another question. Social network analysis is just one tool that can be used to understand terrorism. The basic assumption of network analysis regarding terrorism may not be completely valid. Terrorist organizations are not completely organized in a network structure. Social network analysis must attempt to address underlying root causes of terrorism. It's more important to understand how a network evolves and how to destabilize a network. So, thank you for today, and I would like to hear questions in our 12 minutes left. if you have one, yeah.
First off, thank you for the presentation. It was very beneficial. I have a question regarding the use of VPNs to like, try to like remove a bit of government surveillance. But nowadays, there's a lot of arguments regarding that if you even search or download a VPN, the government will take actions to go around that VPN, so they'd be able to monitor despite it. So you said that we could limit our use of, like, with the work I do, community management, social media management, I need to have access to all these apps and websites, but personally I don't like that my data is always accessible, or I hate the personalization, hyper-personalization of ads. So I try to use VPNs, but I know that they're not really effective. Like VPNs that allow you to use Tor, so you could use internet without being watched. But is there an option, an alternative to even VPNs that they can't look at?
Yeah. It is, the thing that you are talking about is mostly known as DNS spoofing. And there's some other methods. Most of the VPN companies are private, you know. And which means that private companies are not worth trust, first of all. Yes, governments can block VPNs, specific VPNs that they detected. But I would definitely recommend you that each of you can provide or set up your own VPN service for $5 per year. It is not impossible. You don't have to buy a VPN service from someone. You can create your own VPN service. It's possible. There are techniques and tutorials available on the web. I can easily, I can show you if you want. It is not in my presentation, but in this break, I may also add it. Because in terms of the VPN, it is not the only thing. Even with a VPN, you can easily get caught. You know, have you watched the documentary called Silk Road? The person who was using the Onion router, this Tor network, to sell drugs all around America, even he was caught. So it means that this cybersecurity and VPN or this kind of stuff does not provide complete security all the time. We need to change our attitudes in both digital sphere and physical sphere at the same time. But in terms of VPN, there are too many solutions. Just don't get stuck into a specific type of VPN, and be aware that the more people use a VPN service from your country, the more the government has, government employs or tries to intervene to that specific VPN service. That's why personalized VPN service is the best one. Is there anyone else? Or, okay. Sorry, I'm sorry, you are so front. Now, okay, give me a moment.
أشكرك على هذه المحاضرة القيمة.
Sorry, yeah, I can.
وأنت تتكلم عن يعني سلبيات استخدام وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. بدأت أفكر في طريقة إيجابية من خلال مثلا، وهذا قريب على تخصصي، من خلال مثلا نشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان عبر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. فسؤالي، هل يمكنني عمل دراسي مثلا، أو مثلا رصد بعض الكلمات أو المسجات التي تؤدي إلى نشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان عبر مثلا الفيسبوك أو تويتر في بلد معين؟
Yeah, of course, it's kind of this. I know that this presentation was kind of based on conspiracy theories that look like conspiracy theories, and it can sound really negative. But the thing is, when it comes to cybersecurity, this surveillance regime proposed by these new media agencies are completely negative. But I am a loyal social media user as well. I am a political activist and I always use, and as a scholar, I always benefit from social media. The part that I am critical about is the non-public data created or gathered by the governments through sneaky methods without our consent. Of course you can create a humanitarian project through social media, working on the hashtags and all other places, and I don't see any ethical problem with it, as long as you don't buy data from a specific agency or governments that they provide some confidential data about private people. So if it sounds negative, the part that I really am concerned about is the 10% of the data which is not publicly available, which is commercialized. But of course there's public data available on Twitter, and you can, for instance, some families call for help from Twitter. Of course you can use it to track the people in help. For instance, in Turkey there is a map project called Map of Needs. I really like it because it maps the needs of the people. It can be either financial needs, health needs, but people who would like to give something to them, they find the people who need something and they provide them with such things. So in this aspect, it is really good use of social media, use of tracking, analyzing social media and getting something out of it. What I am against is mass surveillance of everything in a really illegitimate way and tracking all single behaviors. And that's all. I think, yeah.
لا لنفس السؤال بس.
What? Oops. Can you repeat?
السؤال هل يعني من خلال المنهجية هل أنا ممكن إني يعني أقدر أحصل على عدد الرسائل من خلال الفيسبوك التي تتعلق بنشر ثقافة حقوق الإنسان ومقارنتها بالرسائل الأخرى كمنهجية لدراسة يعني؟
Of course, yes, you can. You can. There are companies that sell this kind of information. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Shireen, I'm a DMI student. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is, to what extent do you think that educating people about privacy setting and how they can adjust them can limit the amount of information that goes to Facebook? I mean, some people do not even know that they can turn off face detection, for example, on Facebook.
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
I mean, some people don't know that they can actually turn off face detection on Facebook. So to what extent do you think that educating people about privacy setting and the way we can adjust them can help us like limit the amount of information that is shared with Facebook or any other social media platform? Thank you.
I couldn't get it again, sorry. I can't hear it properly, probably.
Okay, my question is, to what extent do you think that educating people about privacy setting and the way we can adjust them can help us limit the amount of information that is shared with Facebook or other social media platforms?
For regular citizens to... Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
The thing is, you can only lobby Facebook. You can limit their activities on specific issues. European cookie law that I mentioned before has done exactly the same thing. So they have kind of limited the access of too many social network or web companies on the activities that they can track. So we cannot make people change their attitudes. We can change the attitudes of the companies most of the time. It is easier, in my opinion, because we have governmental power, non-governmental power, and most of the time the Jacobins of the civil society, they can change things. I don't think that all the Lebanese people using Facebook can change their attitudes regarding using social media and privacy within a day. I can only change the behavior of the people that I can reach here with the workshop that we are going to do, because your information is crucial. Yes, we need to defend these people, these regular people, regular citizens, but you have the high priority as you are citizens, as you are journalists. That's why I think that it is a two-way approach. The first way is citizen approach, which we can provide through lobbying and to governments and making them, Facebook or this kind of companies, track less about us. The second part is we come together in this kind of events. We open new websites in Arabic and all other languages that you can access easily, and they educate you about how to use cybersecurity tools. Okay, 1 minute or something like that. Is there another? Okay. Can I say? Okay. Thank you very much. See you in this second session.